Oh, good morning. I have been here before, and it's good to be back among you. I'm sorry I was unable to be part of your mission conference this weekend. I actually don't remember the name of the person, but he said this: it's not that the Church of God has a mission in the world, but the God of mission has a church in the world. It's not that the Church of God has a mission. It's not like it's one thing we do among the many, but the God who is on mission, the God who came to seek and to save, he's got a church in the world, and he has one right here. And so I love that you've spent this weekend thinking fresh, getting stimulated anew to that. I have had a long-standing interest. I pastored for 24 years. I currently am a professor at Ambrose. But what is it the essence of the mission of God's church? What is the essence of the mission of God? I think it comes down to one thing. But the Apostle Paul says in Romans 8:21 that the entire creation is bound up in suffering, is bound up in, he says, decay, but that Jesus is come to liberate the entire creation from its bondage to decay. And then just a little earlier in Romans 8, he says, and it's you and I, the sons and daughters of this Redeemer who sets us free in order that we might be the hope. The entire creation gets excited about one child of God who somehow is coming into their own, into the freedom for which we've been set free, and knows that it too, the entire creation, will be set free because of the work God is doing in our midst. What does that look like in action when Jesus sets out to set someone free? Brings along a few of his followers as witnesses to that, as embodiments of that. A story I want to look at today with you is one example that we find among many, many in Scripture of Jesus on mission and saying to his church, let's go and do this together. So if you would follow along with me, it might be up ahead on the screen, but otherwise I'm reading from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 4. Oh, that's a bit better. Is that a bit better? Good. You know, you think I'd know how to use these things after all this time, but chapter 4, verse 35 to the end of the chapter. That day, when evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." And leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him." have a colleague at Ambrose University where I teach by the name of Dr. Joel Thiessen, and he's a sociologist, and he does research particularly on what makes churches thrive. And one of the key areas of his research is in an area that's quite new in the study of the sociology of religion. It's called the Duns. Now, prior, a generation ago, there was a lot of research being on the category of people called the nuns, not N-U-N-S with, in a monastery, but nun as in I have no religion. So on a census, people would fill out, I'm this nationality and I live in this address, and then the question would be your religion, and there was this increasing number of people saying none. But what my colleague Joel Thiessen studies is this category that grows as we stand here called the Duns, and it's people don't fill out on a census done, but this growing body of people who used to be deeply involved in the church. They gave faithfully, they attended faithfully, they participated in various activities. They were there every Sunday and usually midweek as well. And at some point they said, I'm done. I'm done. Now he looks into what are at least the reasons those people themselves give for being done. And one of them is they got bored. They got bored. Astonishing to me that we could be followers of Jesus who simply comes up to people and says, would you follow me? And he doesn't tell you where. And if you say, well, do we have reservations? Have you booked ahead? Where are we eating tonight? And he'll say, you know what? Foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests. I don't know where I'm sleeping tonight. Come follow me. I mean, is this an adventure or what? How could we get bored with this kind of a missionary? And sometimes I wonder if it's one of the easiest things, in spite of the wild adventure actually that Christianity is to actually lose the plot and think that faith simply comes down to attending some activities through the week, rather than joining Jesus in liberating the creation from its bondage to decay. That's hard to get bored with. Well, this is a story where Jesus is with his disciples, and they've already been on some of the adventure, but one evening he turns to them, he says, do you want to go over there? Let's go to the other side. This is how he phrases it. And you know what he's pointing at? I've been to this part of the world. He's at the north end of the Sea of Galilee, really a lake, and he's pointing over to Syria. It was Syria then, it's Syria now. You want to go over to Syria? Do you want to go over to the place they don't like us? It's evening time. You should be getting ready for bed. Let's go over to the other side. What they don't know is what's on the other side, other than this country that's in those days and pretty much in our day unwelcoming to their mission. What they don't know is that there's one man over there that Jesus has his sights set on. His name is Legion. It's the very next story. Legion's the man, chock-a-block full of demons. He's chained up, but he breaks the chains, such as the demonic power in him. He has been consigned to the graveyard, the tombs. He runs around howling and naked in the place, and everyone is terrified of him. Here's what Jesus says. Do you want to go over there and find the guy that nobody else wants? Do you want to go over to You'll see when we get there. It's a lunatic asylum, madhouse, high security prison built next to a pig farm. It's part of the story. In a country where nobody wants to welcome us, and I want to go find a guy that nobody wants around. You want to go? Does this sound boring to you? I could see actually why we might flinch if we really understood the kind of mission Jesus, liberating the bondage, the creation from its bondage to decay. When we understand the dimensions, the claim that it's going to. Do you want to go over there and find the people nobody wants in a place where we're actually not welcome? You want to come with me? Let's go to the other side. And this story aptly ante, because as they go, a storm comes up. Now, what's very interesting in this, in the language of this story of going to the other side, we get the impression it's a calm evening. It's a lovely evening. The surface of the water has gone glassy calm. Maybe swirls of pink clouds, feathery pink clouds in the sky. And Jesus says, do you want to go for a little boat ride? And there's no alarm in their hearts, and they're seasoned sailors. And it says, and so they took Jesus along just as he was. And the original language means they took charge. And why not? They're the seasoned salts. They know their way around that lake. They've been at it since they were little boys. And it says that Jesus promptly falls asleep. I'm going to guess that that's with somewhat with their encouragement. I have some family members who are commercial fishermen. And I love to go on the West Coast with them and be in the boat. And sometimes the seas get rough. And often I will offer to help in some way. And their kind response is, "Oh, that's okay. Why don't you just go sit over there?" Because I know when they have to manage rough seas that a landlubber like me is just getting in the way. I was on the coast a few days ago, not in a rough sea, and it wasn't with my family members. But we're coming into dock on a little boat, and I offered to just go out and sort of lash the ropes to the wharf. And the pilot of the boat said, "Oh, that's okay. Could you just get out of the way?" And drove up to the dock and got out of the boat and tied up the boat himself. I wonder if they're looking at Jesus, this man who grew up in Nazareth, which is landlocked, as a carpenter, and they say, "You know, Jesus, hey, there's some nice little cushions over there. You look so tired. Why don't you just curl up and have a little nap? We don't need you for this one." I pastored, as I said, for 24 years, and there was several seasons of my life where I was so in control. I was so the master of the world that I had trained for and had been at and experienced with, that I kind of wanted Jesus around, but not in the way. I can do this. Has it got to that place with you? Jesus could fall asleep. And you got this? As an individual? As a church community? Well, the storm then comes up. And it's got to be a doozy of a storm, because as I say, these pilots of the craft, these seamen, are freaked out. Do you know, I've learned both in boats and in planes, if the people in charge start to panic, you should panic. I was flying a few years ago out of Tampa, Florida, and we're chased by a hurricane the whole way. They actually shut down all the airports for 2 days right after. And the thing was right on our tail all the way from Tampa to Chicago. I have never been in any vehicle that was that sort of bounced around and felt utterly at the mercy of the elements. And I know I was watching the flight attendants, and my panic really kicked in when I noticed that they were panicking. So the people in charge start panicking. Does this ever happen to you? The thing, the world you thought you knew so well, you thought you were the master of, and it shifts in a way that you have no idea what to do next. But at that point, I think we get down to one of the key questions of the whole issue around what it is to be on the mission that God has in the world, not our own mission. And it comes down to this. Do we invite Jesus into our life, or does Jesus invite us into his? See, the evangelical language around what it is to be a follower of Jesus is invite Jesus into your life. Did you learn that at some point? I remember this wonderful Baptist church that I was part of in my early 20s where I came to faith. But the number one phrase when somebody was trying to persuade me to take this step is, you just have to invite Jesus into your life. Well, there's a certain, I don't want to say that this is inappropriate, because there is this beautiful promise that Jesus says, I want to make my home right in you, John 15. I want to come in. Or Revelation 3, I stand at the door and I'm knocking. Ask me to come in. Or Zacchaeus, Luke 17. Zacchaeus, I want to come to your house today. I want to come where you are. So there's a beautiful truth to the reality that we invite Jesus into our life. But if that's all it is, no wonder he can fall asleep. I'm just not on that big of an adventure. And on my own, I'm not going to go to the other side. I'm not going to go to the places no one wants to go to see the people and reach the people no one wants to be around. And I'm certainly not going to endure hell like these disciples do, going through the storm to try to get there. First sign of trouble, I'm turning back. What if, at the heart of the gospel, at the heart of being a disciple, at the heart of joining Jesus in his mission is, yes, I invite him to be part of my life, but then he turns around and subverts it and says, no, I want to invite you to be part of mine. And we're going over there. And one of the ways we know whether we've ever really actually joined Jesus in his invitation to come into his life, into his mission, is the thing I've already discussed. Could Jesus fall asleep and it really wouldn't matter? I go to work, he's asleep, he's somewhere. It's nice to know he's somewhere around. We have our missions group and we talk about, our strategy for reaching the university students or whatnot, but Jesus really doesn't have to be awake for what we're thinking about. Mm. 15 years ago, I went to New York City for the first time. And I had the privilege of having dinner one evening with a gentleman and his wife, and the man's name was Jim Cymbala. And if that sounds familiar to you, you may have read a book or two by Jim Cymbala. His best-known book is called Fresh Wind, Fresh Fire, about the way his church learned to pray. And he's the pastor of Brooklyn Tabernacle in Brooklyn. And I was with a friend, and we went down to the Brooklyn Tabernacle. It was Tuesday night. It was a prayer meeting. It was an amazing event. 3,500 people. It was standing room only on a Tuesday, cold night, cold April night in Brooklyn. And it was standing room only. 3,500 people stormed heaven, crying out to God. After the event was over, we went for a late dinner in a Sicilian restaurant in Manhattan. That was an experience all on its own. And during the dinner, Jim Cymbala turned to me, knowing I was a pastor. He was a pastor, and he said, "Mark, do you know what the number one sin of church leaders in America is?" And I'm going through a little list of what might possibly be the worst sin of church leaders in America. But before I can come to some clarity about that, he answers his own question. Do you know what the worst sin of church leaders in America is? He says the worst sin of church leaders in America is they're not on their knees asking God for all the people that nobody else wants, and then asking God for his power to actually share the gospel with them. And it was a devastating moment for me because I realized I was committing that sin. The church where I was pastoring was right across from the Indigenous Reserve, and I had been there already for 10 years. And they weren't the worst people. They were very good people, but I kept looking across the street. Literally across the street from our church was the reserve, and I kept looking and thinking somebody should have a mission. And all the way home from that trip, the Lord bore down on me. You know what that feels like when the Lord bears down on you? The weightiness of it. And I went, and for the next 2 weeks, I wept. And then finally, I went to the church board, and I said, I believe that God is asking us to somehow bear witness and be among and live the gospel among our neighbors. And we've been neglecting this for the 10 years I've been here, and the 10 years prior to my coming, they've been neglecting it. And I simply said, I don't think we have an option. So you either need to fire me or you need to loose me. And they chose to say, let's go to the other side. And that became the adventure of my life. I was sharing with Kyle, my church actually is very close to your church. I live in Cochrane, but I drove really right by where I'd turn off to go to my church. My church is in Sutina now. And I have a wonderful group of beautiful people that I meet with. And how did I get all these years later to that's where my church is? And all I can say is at some point I decided to stop inviting Jesus into what I was doing and start heeding and hearing his invitation and what he was asking me to do and where he was asking me to go. Let's go to the other side. Well, the good news of this story, there's many good news parts of this story. The Jesus who stands and says, I'm involved in the reordering, the renewing, the recreating of the earth, the world, the whole creation, and all the people on it. I am liberating the creation from its bondage to decay, and I want you to come with me. You interested? But what we see in this story is if we actually go with Jesus on that mission, some questions will come up. And these are actually good news questions because they are a measure of the reality that we've joined Jesus in what he's doing. Here's some of the questions that come up. Here's a couple of questions that the disciples ask. And I think that when you're with Jesus in his mission, you will probably ask these questions more than once. The first is, do you not care if I die? They wake him, and that's what's on their lips. Master, do not care if we die. It gets that kind of crazy sometimes. It gets that desperate. It gets to the place where he takes us to places and takes us through things that it looks like he has abandoned us almost. Do you not care if we die? And the second question that these disciples ask is, who is this? Who is this? Fascinatingly, when they do land on the other side and Legion comes running up, you know what Legion says? First words out of Legion's mouth. What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? This man who is completely taken over by demonic presence. And somehow he's a better theologian than the disciples. It's one of the highest affirmations of the identity of Jesus in Scripture. Jesus, Son of the Most High God. He gets it. And that, he says that, Legion says that as the question of the disciples is still hanging in the air. Who is this? Do not care if I die. These are actually good questions. And they're the kind of questions that tend to come up actually when we're not bored. When we've joined Jesus in his dangerous, subversive, transformative mission in the world that takes us to people and takes us to places that we otherwise wouldn't go, it sometimes gets a little precarious. And then Jesus has a couple questions for them. Why are you so afraid? I mean, the good news of this is that there's a sense of Jesus is going to take us in those places where we're not in control anymore. And something very primal in us starts to stir up this fear. The fear of not being in control, the fear of where this might go. Why are you so afraid? Do you know that the contrast scripturally between the opposite of love in Scripture is not hate, it's fear. Because when we fear, we actually have no capacity to love. Why are you so afraid? I'm going to take you to people that you have to love them with a divine love. Don't be afraid. What is the number one word that comes out of the mouth of some angelic presence when they meet folks on earth? Why are you so afraid? Don't be afraid. And then the other question Jesus asked, do you still have no faith? Here's how all this comes together. 4 questions in this little text. 2 that the disciples asked, 2 Jesus has asked. Do you not care if I die? Who is this? And Jesus says, why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? Do you see that one of the things that happens when we're actually joined Jesus in the mission that he's on in the world, liberating the creation from its bondage to decay, is that every opportunity or every step of the way is an opportunity to rediscover his love for us, that he does care, to rediscover who he is, have a fresh revelation of who he is and his power, to have him speak to our fear and replace it with love, and to have him increase our faith. Every single time we join Jesus in what he's doing, these things are happening. You see more of him. You experience more of him. Your faith in him grows, and your fear is replaced with love. I wonder if you got it backwards. Anyone here? If you invited Jesus into your life and stopped there, and there's a part of you that's kind of bored with it all. I mean, you may not say that out loud, but there's a question in you that's like, is this it? Is the whole thing? I'm wondering if you would dare to actually let Jesus invite you into his life. And call you, you don't quite know where, just the other side. But it might be a place that nobody else really wants to go, to people nobody else wants to be with. And along the way, he has so much revelation and so much work to do in you that it will never get boring. Eugene Peterson, in one of his books, tells a story. And it was when Peterson was a little boy growing up in the mountains of Montana. And he went to a little Lutheran church there. And there was a man at the church named Leonard Storm. Everyone called him Brother Storm. Big man, big farmer, big rancher. And Eugene used to like to go out because the place where he lived and the ranch that Brother Storm had were right beside each other. And Eugene, little boy of 5, 6, used to like to go out and stand on the rails of the fence between the two properties and watch Brother Storm work in his fields. And one day, little 5, 6-year-old Eugene Peterson standing on the rails watching Brother Storm in his huge tractor, open tractor, no cab, big tractor. And Brother Storm's on this tractor driving along, plowing a field, harvesting a field, whatever he's doing in his big tractor. Huge man sitting perched up in that seat. The wild sky above him, this profile of this man moving across the field. And little Eugene stands on the rails of this fence and looks at Brother Storm with longing in his heart. Oh, I wish I could sit with him on that tractor. He's standing there wishing, and suddenly Brother Storm looks and sees him, stops dead the tractor, stands up on the seat of this tractor and begins to holler and wave at Eugene Peterson. The wind is blowing hard. Eugene Peterson can't hear what he's saying, just sees him hollering and waving. He's afraid. He thinks that he's being told to go away. And so he runs and scoots into his house. Next Sunday in church, Brother Storm comes up to little Eugene Peterson. He calls him Little Pete. And he says, "Little Pete, why did you run away when I waved to you and called to you?" And little Pete says, well, I didn't know you were asking me to come. Little Pete, did you not see me? I was standing on the tractor. I was waving to you. I was yelling to you. I was saying, come. And did you not? I saw you. I just saw you were telling me to go away. Little Pete, no, did you not see? I was going like this. I thought you were telling me to go back. No, little Pete, I wanted you to come. I wanted you to join me. Little Pete, what do you do when you want somebody to come to you? And Eugene Peterson does this. Oh, little Pete, that is piddling. On the farm, we do things big. I wonder if you're bored. And if you are, I wonder if it's that you've been doing this with Jesus. Well, he's doing this with you. Why don't you go to the other side? God, thank you for the opportunity to be among these good people today. Thank you for the mission that you are on in the world. Thank you for the way that you care and see and welcome people, all people, the Pharisee, the tax collector, the priest, the prostitute. Thank you that the people who are so shattered that they can't get to you, the legions of the world, you go to them. And thank you that you care and love us enough, even though sometimes we wonder what you got us into. But you care and love us enough. You say, will you come with me? Let's go over there. And as we go, and it stirs things up, let me reveal again who I am to you, that you might know my love for you. That I might take your fear away. That I might increase your faith. But Father, I pray for all here that if we have simply stopped in our faith with inviting you in, and that's where we got stuck and probably bored, that Father, we would hear afresh this other side of being a disciple, that you invite us into your life, into your mission, into your adventure. And you're going to the other side. And so, Father, I pray that you would stir us up to hear, to heed, and to follow. And I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to this sermon. We hope you found it connected you to the God of truth and love, who we worship and serve at Bethany Chapel. If you have any questions or want to connect to any of our pastors, please go to our Bethany Chapel app and choose Connect, or go online to bethanychapel.com and click Come. Thanks again, and God bless you.